We're starting to see in our projects that are, especially when we start adding dependencies, that there's a lot of code that's being added to our projects, and the question starts to come up, well, how do I bundle all of this code and so that I can put it onto a server and have it be more manageable, a more manageable bundle, and bundle, that's the key word. And so I want to introduce you to this thing called Webpack. And it's not necessarily my intention for you to know how to use Webpack, but I want you to see how it works, because when we do our next project, the project itself utilizes Webpack. And so it's helpful to understand what's going on behind the scenes. So I'm going to look at this Webpack page because this is what I'm talking about. I just did a search on Webpack and it comes up with this .js.org file. And if I scroll down, there's information about what Webpack does. And in essence, it's bundling our code. And I will show you how this works. I'm going to click on this Get Started. And there's this great tutorial that I'm going to walk through. So I'll do it here on the screen. But if you want to go back and reference what was happening, this is where I'm getting it from. So that way you have another kind of a textbook kind of thing for an old-fashioned term. So I'm going to do what it's telling us to do. It says make a directory, and we're going to call it Webpack demo. And then it says to cd into that directory. Oh, that's definitely not it. There we go. And then it says we need to do npm init. So we're going to create a package.json file that's going to track our project. And here it says -y, and what -y is just automatically accept all of the defaults, and so I don't have to answer all the questions. So that should run, and there's a package.json file that was created for us. And now we're going to open up, I'm going to use Visual Studio Code, so I'll do code period, and in my other screen where you can't see, so I'll bring it over here, we have that project started. Let me make it so we can see it. Okay, and there's our package.json file with some of the beginning information. All right, so a template to our file. All right, so the next thing that we have to make sure we do is we need to install npm. We need npm to install this Webpack and this tool, which is the CLI for Webpack, meaning that we're going to install the software, but we're also going to install the software which will enable us to put in commands, similar to, here is a CLI, a command line interface command. We want a CLI, some commands available to us for Webpack. And then this save dev means that this is just for development, that these files, these Webpacks, are not part of the production dependency files. And I'll show you in what happens with in our package.json when we go over that. So anyway, I'll get there. So we did the npm init, and so now we need to install Webpack. So I'm assuming that's going to take a while to run. They usually do. So I'm going to put this on pause, and I will be back when it's all done. All right, it did take a while, so I'm glad I put that on pause. But once it was all finished, then my package.json got updated with the information that we just installed. And this is what the dev dependencies. So these are, when we did the -- save dev, and we said this was for dependence, the dependencies were for development only. That's exactly what's happening here. So if we're going into production, and I'm going to show you that in a little bit here, this is what Webpack is all about. Once we bundle this package for production, we don't need these dependency files. These are just for development. And so you'll see where I'm headed with that in a minute, but that's why we're doing this -- save dev. All right, so next it wants us to create an index.html and a source file. And I'm going to deviate just a little bit from this, and that is I'm going to create a distribution, dist folder, which is where I'm going to put my index. And I'll show you why in a moment. So right now, just kind of please take that at face value. All right, so I'm going to create the index.html. I think that they provide the code down here. There it is. And so there's the index information. So we'll put that up here. And then it asks us to do a source file with the index.js, so a source folder. So we're going to do a src, and in the src, which shouldn't be in the distribution, mine is in the distribution, so I'm just going to pull that down, move it, move it somewhere else. Do I want to move it to, there we go, yep, that's what I wanted to do. Okay, so it's not, I had it inside the distribution folder. And so now I'm going to make a new file, and it says to do it as in the source file, put in index.js. Okay, and in the index.js, we're going to put some of this code. Okay, so far so good. And then something else that kind of went unnoticed there, but I'm going to bring it out. So what's happening here, if you look at your file, is I'm going to look at index first of all, and I'm noticing that there is a script tag to a CDN to an external library. And so I'm going to go to npm and look at lodash. Lodash is a very popular library, and it is, let's see, where do I need to go? I'm trying to find, there's how we would install it, but we're going to do that in a moment. I'm looking for the documentation. Is this going to take me to the documentation for this? Nope, that's npm's documentation. So, where is it? It is on here somewhere right in front of me, and you've probably already are looking at it. And I am not seeing it. Where is it? There's the repo. There it is. Okay. So I clicked on, just to be sure, I clicked on the home page. There is the source code. So if you want to go to their GitHub account and pull down their source code. But anyway, so this is where I wanted to be. And this is the documentation for lodash. And the reason why they call it lodash is because they use an lodash. So they use that underline as their tagline. I don't know, that's a bad word for it, but that is what it is. Anyway, so if I look at, I'm looking in the documentation to try and understand what the code was that was here, and that is that they used, if we look at the documentation, they use this _.join and something in order to do something. So if I scroll down and I look for the lodash _.join, what you're seeing is that that is a simple function that was written for us that's going to take in an array, and it says converts all elements in the array into a string separated by a comma. So this is kind of a contrived example, I think, just to show what's happening here, or to show an example, but that's okay. So what seems to be happening is we're going to take the string, the two an array items that says, one says hello, I'm going to make that a Webpack, and then those are separated by commas. So what we're doing is making a string of hello space Webpack. But the point of this exercise is to demonstrate utilizing some outside libraries. So Okay, so now that we have all that in, we're bringing in a CDN in order to run that package. And if we open up our browser, then we should see, oh, mine isn't in the right place. Sorry, that would make sense. So let's see, source index, so we need to bring it down to, that is why they did it that way. So my bad. So if we pull it out of, okay, so this makes sense because of the order in which things are in the directory. So index, look into, in the current directory, look into the source folder, and then look for the index.js file. And we're no longer in the distribution folder. We're in the, there we go. So now we're getting that hello Webpack. All right, so that's one way to do it, and certainly the way we've been doing it in the past. But now we're going to look at a different way to start importing and exporting our code, and then we'll use Webpack to bundle that. So that being said, let's go back to the directions, which I think I've lost. There they are. And so if we scroll down and continue on with this direction, I'm just going to do it from here. I'm not going to, but you can follow along from there. All right, so what's going to happen next is the following. We are going to get rid of this script tag. And we need to import, I think I just brushed through that. So we need to look for the directions. We're going to, not import, but we're going to install lodash. So we can use this line right here. npm I is a shortcut for install, by the way. So we need to do what it says here and do npm I install lodash. So I'm going to do that. Okay. All right, and so then the directions tell us to, in order to utilize that, we need to use the var, and we're using the lodash as our variable. So var lodash equals require lodash. So now we're going to bring in that library. And so if I go into my index.js, and at the very top of this file, I should be able to require that lodash. So now that's good. But what you're probably recognizing is that if I use the require, then it's no longer going to be available in the browser. So this is going to give us a little bit more challenge. So that's what we're going to do next, is figure out, well, how do we make that available to us in the browser? All right, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to run Webpack. And to do that, I just need to type in the word Webpack. And what will happen is some things come up. That's good. Some warnings came up. I'm not going to worry about that right now. But what also happened was the distribution folder, a main.js was put into it. And so what's happening is Webpack is compiling all of that code. It's grabbing all of that JavaScript for me, and it's putting it into this distribution folder into main. So now I don't have to be concerned about all of this. I just know that it's working. And so the point here is that if I utilize just the dist folder and main.js and index, which is why I was putting that in there in the first place, I no longer need the node modules and all of these other files. So for production, I'm going to put this, keep index in here now. And so the idea here is that for production, these are the only files I need. In other words, Webpack compiled all of the files that were necessary. So remember back in the beginning when we said that we had some dev dependencies, those were ignored in our production JavaScript. So our Webpack dependencies are not compiled into our main.js. So here the point is now that I should be able to just open up index with one exception, and that is that I need to, if I keep it both in the distribution folder, I need to no longer have my source as the index. I need to change it to main because that's now my compiled code. So if I now just run main, if I can spell it, main, and put it in the proper quotations. All right, so now what should have happened is I can deploy my index.html and my main.js and not worry about the rest of these files. So let's just test that. Let me open this up in the default browser, and sure enough, that worked. So now recognize that I am compiling my code before I am actually getting to look at it in the browser, but the trade-off is my code is compiled, and so if I'm starting to build my web page with dependency files, I don't need to worry about the node modules folder. It's all going to be compiled, and that's what Webpack is doing for me. So I just want to give you another visual so you can see how this is all working. All right, so let's add on to what we've got here. Again, I just want to give you some more insight as to what Webpack is doing for us, or give you a visual of some things that you might have seen before and kind of connecting the dots. So if I look at this component function, all it's doing is it's creating a div, and then it is using the inner HTML of that div, and that element is being returned, and then we are appending that to the body of our HTML. So what I'm going to do is do a little bit, I'm going to add a little bit of extra code onto this, and that is that I'm going to create a ID I'm going to call that ID the div. And so I can give this element an ID that I can get a hook on for my next function. And so what I'm going to do next is I'm going to create a function, and we're going to put it on a, let's see, how do I want to do this? I think I'll just put it on this page just so you can see what I'm up to here. And so the idea here is that I want to take whatever's in that ID that was created, and I'm just going to append on something new. That doesn't really make sense, but it's just for the demonstration. So go ahead and create that element, and then I'm going to append stuff. And the idea there is create the element and then add some extra. So hello Webpack, and then it should say new stuff. Okay, that makes sense, and I think everybody's on board with that. But we're going to do something a little bit different. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create in my source another file. So recognize that source is my production, distribution is my compiled work. And so I'm going to create a new index file, and I'm going to call it something like other.js, just for no good reason. And what I'm trying to get here is, or trying to give you a visual of, is I can certainly put all of this on one JavaScript page, and I can keep it in order so I can make sure that append gets called in the right time and all of that. But if I have a lot of code, especially a big project, this is going to get unyieldy. That it really would be nice if I could add some other pages and have them all sort of compiled into one instead of having 4 different ones. But from a maintenance standpoint, it's easier to keep track of them on different pages. And so the idea here is that I'm going to take these 2 functions and I'm going to put them on this other page. And the only exception now is, well, I could use another script tag, that's true, but I'm trying to give you a visual of why we use the word require, or why we see these words when we're starting to work with packages. And so in this other, what I'm going to do is I need to do something called export. And I'm going to export this function, and I'm going to export this function. And what I'm doing by exporting is making it available to another JavaScript, or I'm making those functions available outside of this particular page. So it's kind of like a public. It can be, if you're used to classes, it's sort of like a public method or something along those lines. If I don't export it, if I do something like this, then this function is only available to this page. But since I'm exporting them, I can have access to, and in fact, what I'm telling Webpack is, you need to know that this is my entry file. By default, the entry is going to be index.js. So by default, Webpack is going to look in a source folder for an index.js as the beginning point of its compiling. And then if I need other JavaScript files or other resources, Webpack will find it here in the index.js and go look for it and bring those in to compile as well. And so I need to import those 2 functions. And so the way that we do that is, and it's just, I think, easier to copy and paste so you don't see me typing, I'm going to copy in this line of code that is going to, all right, so it's importing in that which I exported on the other page. And so if I go back and I look at the other page, let me put these side by side so I can see them together. So if I look at this page, I've exported this function. I've imported it in this function so that it is available here. And the same with component. And so now what will happen when we run the compiler is, and the compiler is Webpack, for lack of a better word. So when we run Webpack, Webpack is going to come into the index.js file. It's going to go look for the dependencies it needs in the lodash folder, or the lodash library, which was all imported into Node modules. It's going to go find append stuff from wherever we said to look for it, other.js, and it's going to go look for component in other.js. Now, if you don't put this dot which means current directory, and the /, which is a folder indication, the compiler, the Webpack, will give you nasty red lines. So make sure you include that in it. But now that we've done this, and I run Webpack, let's see what happens. So now when I run it, then let me pull this back out again. So remember, when we run it, then automatically this main.js is written for us in a distribution folder, DIS. That's all defaults. That can be overwritten, but for the moment, all I really want to get across to you is how this is working. And so now this index and main are the only two files that are necessary for the distribution. And if I run that, it should work, and boom, it does. So I'm not necessarily concerned right now that you can run a Webpack. If you can do this example, that's great. But I want you to understand what's happening. And so when you start to see words like export and import, you'll know this is why, because there is some functions or some constants or some variables that are written on an external file that were exported from that file so that they're available for import on in this case on this index file. The index file is where Webpack is looking, so it knows where to find all of the dependencies that are needed, so it can bundle all of those dependencies and all of those production only necessary files into this distribution folder, into index.html and main.js, so that way I can now put these on a production server and not have to worry about all these other files. So that's how we will deploy our website.